Because a few days ago my channel reached the 10,000 subscribers, I asked you if you have some questions, so Q&A, that's a bit the idea. And of course there will also be a giveaway, so stay tuned. In this video I will make nothing at all, but I will try to answer your questions as good as I can. Let's do this. I have here 2 pages of questions, and question that several times come back is my background, a little bit my life story, and how long and how much and all these things. So my idea is to try to condense it in a little life story. I was born, of course, just like everybody else. I was born in 1963 in Belgium, because it was also a question. Now, my family and before generations, all Belgian people. I tell you this because sometimes, you know, there's people born in one country and then they go live in another country, but whatever. And of course, also just like everybody else, the first 6 or 7 years of my life I don't remember much. I have some flashbacks, of course, but okay. When I was 7, we moved with a family to a brand new house, freshly built, and it was in a neighborhood and it was also brand new. So there were streets everywhere, but no or almost no houses, no apartments. And in these few houses that already existed lived, of course, a few very good friends, more or less the same age, and it means that we were the kings of the neighborhood, because there was nothing or nobody else. And for us it was paradise. No houses, no cars, no nothing, and then some plick-plock here and there. There were new constructions. So if we wanted to build a kind of cabin or whatever, to find building materials, we were good. And of course also because of empty streets, it was the ideal place to do some bicycle races or go-kart races and all this other stuff. And I suppose, just like almost everybody else, of course I had also grandparents. And my granddad, he was a blacksmith. And a very nice example of one of the many things he made is this thing here. And sometimes we went together to his workshop. Now you have to imagine a wall full of dust, of course, one big electric motor, and then the leather flat belt that goes to the ceiling, and there's one long line shaft over the whole workshop, and all these flat belts come down again on every machine. And at the other end of the workshop there was his coal forge. Now that was always fun. Sometimes he gave us a piece of iron and then we made fire, make the iron red hot and hammer the shit out of it. And then of course after a half an hour we were as black as coal. But that's okay. So it could well be that my interest for technical things, for machines, comes from him. I don't know. Now, since very small already, I was interested in technical things. When I received a new toy, of course I had to take it apart to see how it works, how the inside was. And friends and family, sometimes they gave me things like old televisions, for example, radios, some kind of film cameras, whatever. And then if you can fix it, fix it, it's yours, and if you can't, at least you will know how it works. And of course, I took it apart and I fixed it almost never. When I was 12, I went to technical school. All my friends, my brothers, they went to college and all these other kind of schools. I was the only one to go to technical school. And what I wanted to do was learn electricity and electronics. I was fascinated by the idea that you can plug in some kind of device and on the other end there's sound coming out, music coming out. I always liked music, so my idea was to maybe repair or build my own music machines like amplifiers and guitars and radios and TVs and whatever's. The first machine I learned in the technical school was the shaper. And the teacher who teaches us, he knew very well what he was talking about. So that was nice. I learned a lot about shapers and using the shaper in technical school. Next machine I learned on was of course the lathe, and it was this exact model of lathe I learned in school. So when I saw this one for sale not far away from here, I bought it. So for the next couple of years I learned machining on the lathe, on the shaper, on the milling machine, and I was rather good at it. But there was a problem. Maths, science, languages, not good. Normally everything I think is interesting I learn very easily. All you have to do is show me once, I've got it, okay, let's go for it. But my problem was that math, science and languages, not my thing. I couldn't get it in. So I had to change directions. I went to another school to become a car mechanic. Way less maths, it was more calculations, so that was okay. And then language was much easier, and science was also much easier. So no problem at all. And so after 3 years I became an official car mechanic with a graduation, and of course I also have the graduation of electromechanics, which means machining and electricity, but only the lower part, the specialization years, I didn't do. And after I finished school with, of course, graduation, there was the military service as a conscript. Now, that was a total waste of time. I absolutely hated the military service. But at least with one little light point is that I came out of it and I had my drive license for truck. So my first job was in Antwerp in the port as a truck driver. And later on I worked as a mechanic, but no cars. I worked on trucks and trailers. I also worked in all kinds of different repair shops. So indeed, almost every time technical stuff. I also worked a couple of years in tourism. It's a little bit special working for tourists, but most of the time I was in the workshop fixing broken things, so that was okay. And then one day with my girlfriend we decided to build a house, and indeed I did build my own house. The only professionals that came was to dig the pit for the foundations, and all the rest I built myself with help of family and some friends, and it took about 2-3 years, I think. But I absolutely enjoyed it. And with my girlfriend we also had 2 children, a boy and a girl. And unfortunately a few years later came divorce. Now, we never were married, it was my girlfriend, but divorce, separation, you know, result is the same. And now for 20 years already I live alone and I absolutely enjoy it. I have no one who plays the boss, no one tells me what to do, and freedom! Now, don't get me wrong, this freedom idea, I'm not promoting divorce. So if you're not divorced, stay together, okay? But for me it was an important moment, because the years before I was interested in boats and I wanted to build my own boat, but I don't know a thing about boats. Maybe I gonna build one and then put it in the water and see that I don't like it. So maybe it's a better idea to go work on boats, so I get paid for it. But to work in inland barging, of course you need all kinds of documents and certificates, and so I went to school for it. I stopped my job, I went to school, and I came out with all the documents I needed, and I worked on barges, and I think I worked on barges for 17 years in total, and it is a very nice job. And then 4 years ago came the health problems. So I had this terrible cancer, and it's a little bit a miracle that I survived, and since then I'm unable to work. My body works for the moment for almost 50%, and that's not a number I just pick somewhere. It is effective 50% for a person of my weight and my age. But that's not a problem, because the other 50% still works. Now, to continue, let's talk a little bit shaper, because there were a few shaper questions, which of course I appreciate, because shapers are my favorite machines. I don't know why, it's just that I like shapers, but I suppose maybe you already notice. A question that several times comes back is this knob here, what it is, what it does. This limits the movement of the clapper. It's free to move, but it will not lift all the way. It also reduces the bouncing of the tool on the backstroke. So this was a very good idea. Now, about the machine itself, the history behind it, I don't know. This thing is built in the Netherlands by A.I. Hembrugh. The company still exists, and they used to make a lot of gear for the military. There was also a question about my clamps I used in previous video. Now, for the moment they serve to hold my papers, but I will put my papers here, out of view. These things came with the shaper when I bought it, so I suppose this was custom made for some kind of project that I don't know what. The person who sold me this, he never used the shaper. He bought it for whatever project, I don't know what, and never used it, and then sold it to me. And these were mounted on the table. And my first idea, what the heck do you want me to do with this? But very quickly I was very happy to have them, because I can put the T-nuts in here, as you can see, and these are both exactly the same. There is a threaded holes in here for bolts. And this thing, of course, I can mount in the length, but also in the width. So all I have to do is slip them in here. Very handy to use as a stop or as a clamp. Now, of course, in this configuration I can put whatever width in here that I have, no problem. It's in the length. I'm limited by the distance of the T-slots. Last week's setup was something more or less like this, of course, with the bolts in here too, but I'm sure you got a point. And my part was pinched between these bolts and this part here. If I wanted to put two parts at the same time, not enough space. But if I put this one here, too much space. And if I want to fill it in with some kind of shim or whatever, it's gonna be too wide, and I'm a bit afraid it's gonna push up. Now this thing is gonna turn into a cannon. What maybe I could have done, and that is an idea that I had also in the comments, to cut the T-shape itself, is to put some kind, my part here, and some kind of shim here, some sacrificial piece of steel. Maybe that could have worked, but whatever, how I did it, it worked too. And this is also, of course, one of the reasons I made my T-shaped parts here on the shaper, because of these clamps. These do not fit on the milling machine. So an upcoming project is gonna be making the same, but for the milling machine. Right, let's sit down and relax a bit in my vacation stool. One of the many questions. How do you stay warm in the winter in your latitude when you work on a barge? You don't. Work outside, getting wet, getting cold. If you find somewhere 5 minutes, you go quickly inside, take your clothes off, take a nice hot shower, put on dry clothes, and everything wet you put in the dryer. And after 1 or 2 hours, do it again. That's the only way. Why is it not possible to fix the switch handle on the lathe? Because it is a very complicated system, and there is a tiny bit of wear on every different moving part. So if you fix one part a little bit, okay, it will be a little bit better, but I have to fix the whole thing. And from my experience, when I try to fix the switch on this lathe, I had to buy a new one. So I don't touch this very complicated and expensive part. I will leave it as is, use it as is. What workshop project have you always dreamed of having a go at? I think that's a good question, and I don't have an answer. I like to make things, I like to build things. I could not, for example, work as a machinist and then standing 8 or 10 hours a day on a milling machine and make 200 times the same part. No, it's not interesting. I like to build, you know, the fabrication idea. Start from scratch and make something. And in fact, whatever, make something or fix something, that's always good, nice to do. Where do the name Rustinox come from? In fact, it is a paradox, because if you cut it in two, you have rust. Rust is, of course, corrosion of steel. And inox is a name we gave here to stainless steel, so steel that cannot corrode but corrodes, rusting stainless steel paradox. That's all. What machine tool would you like to own, be it an upgrade or an addition? I don't know. I'm looking around to try to find a bigger shaper. This one is perfectly fine, but sometimes for me it is too small. And I would like to find a shaper with an automatic down feed, not only a cross feed. This one is manual down feed. It's not really fun to use. Is there any benefit in a small shop having a much bigger lathe? It depends, of course, of the workshop. If you, with your bigger lathe, you're gonna fill all the free space you have in your workshop, it's not really a benefit. But in my opinion, you can make small parts on a big lathe, but you cannot make big parts on a small lathe. Now, this is of course not a big lathe, but to work a little bolt line. This one, I think it is. Here we have a problem. If I close the jaws, it holds, but not really. What I do, I have this little drill chuck. I have several. Put this thing in here, nice and tight, and now I have a really nice little chuck to work small parts. So as you can see, small parts on a big machine, possible. Big parts on a small machine, not possible. The problem is, of course, you need enough space, floor space, to put your big machine. Right, question number, the next one. What is the first thing you ever made on a shaper? I don't know. It was in school, so I suppose we had to square up some piece of stock. I don't remember, but I suppose it was something really simple. Make square. How do you make downfeed adjustments while the shaper is in motion? Now, most of the time, to make adjustments on the shaper, I stop it. Sometimes you cut really slowly and then you can by hand while the thing is moving, but most of the time I don't touch it. Stop the machine, make adjustment and then start again. How high do you estimate the value of all the machines and tools you use in your workshop? That's a difficult one. I have no idea. I don't know even how to explain. You know, if you buy, for example, this shaper, someone put it for sale for price. It's for you to decide if it's cheap or expensive. What is the value you want to give for this machine? So, and then starting to count, maybe this one is that price and the other one is that price, but the tools that go with it, total, it's close to impossible to tell you the total value of the machines. But there's always too much, I suppose. With the knowledge and the experience you have now, how differently would you set up your workshop starting from scratch? That's also a very complicated question. Imagine that I have nothing here in my workshop, but I know exactly what machines I'm gonna put in. First thing to do is, of course, measure the floor space and also the free space you need around it to work. Like for example, the space you need to work between these two machines. And of course also between the machine and the workbench on that side and the workbench on the other side. I think it's also important to keep in mind that a workshop is a living space. It's not a museum, it's not an exposition. It's part of the life, it's part of movement, which means things can change. I have a small collection of screwdrivers and I made this piece of wood to put them in. And a few years later I had a little bit more screwdrivers. So I had to make another piece of wood to put them in. Now this is a stupid example, but I'm pretty sure you know what I mean. You're gonna buy a machine, put it in your workshop and it works perfectly fine. And one day you stumble on some kind of other machine that you can't let go. Where you're gonna put it? Time to make some changes. So a workshop is never fixed. Have you ever needed to use cutting fluid or similar on a shaper? Of course. Better finish, longer tool life. So yes, cutting fluid. Where do you get the motivation to make weekly videos? That's an easy one. Everything that is fun to do is easy and doesn't need motivation. It comes automatically. What is your favorite band? Favorite band to listen in the workshop? Now here in the workshop I only listen to the radio and I like the rock classics, the older generation rock classics. And there is a radio station here that gives only this, so I'm spoiled. Will you make a grinder for the lathe? One day, maybe. For the moment, I don't see the need, so I will not make it, but if one day I need a grinder for the lathe, I will make a grinder for the lathe, that's for sure. Some people asked also about my scrap pieces. Do I collect scrap? Do I have a lot of scrap? These are small pieces. And I also have a little bit bigger pieces like these plates and some rounds. And outside I have a few shafts, but I can't show you because it's dark outside, but that's all I have. Some of you also wanted to know what gear I use to make my videos. Now for the slow motion shots on the shaper, here's the setup. I have this Mac base and I made a little support for my iPhone, and in I think every iPhone there is this slow motion system that you can do, so it's very easy. And for all the other video footage I use this Sony Handycam. This is a very cheap little camera with absolutely no options, and I don't use an external microphone, only the microphone that's in here. And the reason why I don't use an external mic, even if the sound is better, I think the sound directly on the camera sounds more natural. Here I'm standing close, so I'm sounding close. And here I'm standing far, so I'm sounding far. More natural. Am I spelling your name correctly. And how do you pronounce it? Michel. Right, next. How are the Ukrainian kids doing? This is, in my opinion, the most important question of all. The most human. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any news of the Ukrainian kids that were next door, and I don't have news of these Ukrainian people that lived here in my house for 6 months. So I can't answer this question. I don't know. No news at all. And last but not least, there were also a few questions about the tram where I work sometimes as a volunteer. Now, I'm gonna make a video about it, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it now, but because it's winter time and the tourist season is closed, there is absolutely no movement at the tram, so there's not much to show. But when the sun starts to shine again, I will post a video about the tram. Promise. I hope I answered all your questions. You never know, maybe I missed some. I hope not. Before we get to the giveaway, first this thing here. Last week I received a package from Matthias in Germany. And Matthias, he sends me a whole collection of end mills. And he also sends me this special one. It's not really an end mill, it's some kind of chamfer tool, but you can index the angle you want here. So, for example, to make seats, valve seats or something, and he even includes some spare cutters for it. Now, of course, if you put this thing directly in the milling machine, you have only one radius, so this is meant, I suppose, to be put in a boring head, so you can change the radius. He also sent me these two big milling cutters, so this is gonna hug material, and enormous face mill. Now it's not enormous, but for the machine I have here, this is a big one. And what's nice about it, if I go over here, I have even an arbor for it, so that's gonna work. And with this face mill, he also gives me some spare cutters. That's nice. He also included some countersinks, for example this big one, that's nice. A whole collection of different flavors and sizes of taps, all brand new, and also this tap wrench, also brand new. So Matthias in Germany, thank you very much for all these magnificent toys, and I'm sure they will be very useful here in the workshop. And now it's finally time for the giveaway. And for the 10k subs, I give away this thing. This is a homemade copy of the James Watt micrometer. And I wanted to give away 10,000 of these, but unfortunately I have only one. So you can win only one. Now, maybe it's important to know that this dial, when I built it, I numbered it in the wrong direction. And I started making a new one to number it in the right direction. And then I thought, that's not a good idea, because this thing was built as is now. This is the original build. Homemade sheet, of course. Now, if you want to win this thing, and this is the only prize I'm gonna give, put it in the comments, and then next week we will do some kind of draw, and I hope it's for you. Go for it in the comments.